Carol, do we have to reach as far back as Germany in the 1930s to find American examples of what, like, we saw in Charlottesville? I mean,
Oh no, not at all. I thought of the images coming out of Charlottesville this weekend, and it reminded me of Little Rock in 1957 when 9 Black honor students went to integrate Central High 3 years after the Brown decision, and the mob came out in force to stop 9 Black children from getting an education. The other thing that struck me and gave me a sense of Birmingham during the Freedom Rides, which is when African Americans and whites were riding interstate buses. When they got to Birmingham and they stepped off of the bus, they looked around and then whites attacked, just started beating. Or when I think about Birmingham blowing up, there are these light motifs that keep echoing through in America. And so we call them Nazis. And the reason why it's easy to say Nazis is because we don't feel complicit in that evil. That makes it so much harder than when we talk about these folks who love the Confederacy. And so we've gone to calling them Nazis, or to strip the reality of who they are out of that language by calling them alt-right, when what we really mean are white supremacists.
Can you talk about what you think white nationalists expect to accomplish in 2017? All the demographic trends show that the U.S. isn't going to revert back into a majority white country. So, what's the goal here?
To me, what they want to accomplish, I mean, and you heard it from David Duke when he said that here in Charlottesville, we're filling Trump's promise. When he talked about make America great again, what they really meant was make America white again. And then I'm putting an asterisk by that, because what that really means is to create a society where the resources of this society funnel in to a whites-only space, but that it is propped up and supported by a vast labor pool without rights. This is why you're seeing those policies coming out of Jeff Sessions' Department of Justice and coming out of the Department of Homeland Security. All of this is to basically criminalize the Black and brown populations in the United States to a point where they can provide the labor that can create and sustain a very comfortable lifestyle for whites.
So these policies are being enacted by the White House. They're being pushed by the Justice Department. But what role do white nationalists play in feeding and aiding those goals?
Oh, they are absolutely essential to it. When Trump began his campaign saying that Mexicans are rapists and criminals, he was sending the signal to those white nationalists that it was now their day, that they could begin to act and to say the things that they felt had been forbidden for so long because of the change in the norms brought about by the civil rights movement.
They also serve the purpose of distancing people from the everyday, more policy-based instances of racism and racial discrimination. So, in the wake of Charlottesville, you've seen Republican office holders accepting the president condemn the white supremacists in Charlottesville, condemn the violence, explicitly label the white supremacists as white supremacists. But these lawmakers who did this, whether it's Orrin Hatch or of Utah, or Marco Rubio of Florida, or Cory Gardner of Colorado, none of them have spoken up against voter suppression regimes in Republican states. And what the white nationalists sort of do is they provide a way for more mainstream figures to say, well, we're not them, therefore we reject racism, and then kind of quietly accept a policy regime that entrenches racial inequality, that effectively denies the rights of citizenship to millions of Americans. It doesn't just obscure that latter part, but it also enables them to kind of act affronted when you say, well, hey, this stuff you're doing or supporting is directly harming non-white Americans.
Right. This is not racism that over there, that sort of frothing at the mouth,
Right,
that's the real
racism.
racism.
Right.
Which is Jamel's nickname on Twitter, by the way. The real racist.
Right. And that's part of what also is getting, I would say, missed in this focus on Trump. He stepped into something where the ground had already been tilled for him for decades. And that was the Southern strategy. That was Nixon talking about law and order and defining criminals as black. This is Ronald Reagan launching his presidential campaign in Philadelphia, Mississippi, in Neshoba County, which is the site where Schwerner, Cheney, and Goodman, three civil rights workers in the early 1960s, were killed by sheriffs and the Klansmen with the help of the Mississippi State Sovereignty Commission. This is where Reagan launches his campaign saying, I'm a firm believer in states' rights. What Trump stepped into, Republicans had been tilling that ground for a long time. And even think about how you had Mitt Romney in 2012 seeking Donald Trump's birther support for the presidential nomination. The Republicans are going to have to own this, and they're going to have to begin to think through what they have done by inviting this toxin of racism into their party.